Brad Pitt walked onto the set of Jimmy Kimmel Live, expecting a casual evening charming banter. Some laughs, a few anecdotes about his latest role in a gritty biopic that critics were already calling Oscar-worthy. Dressed in an unstructured navy suit with just a hint of laid-back elegance, Brad flashed that famously relaxed grin to the cheering audience. He was a seasoned guest, no stranger to late night, no stranger to attention. But from the very start, there was an unusual edge to the conversation. Kimmel, known for his irreverent style, opened with a playful jab about Brad's recent profile in Vanity Fair, focusing on Pitt's musings on mortality, fatherhood, and forgiveness. "So you're basically turning into a philosopher now," Jimmy quipped. Brad laughed politely, but the glint in his eye suggested he wasn't entirely amused. Still, he played along, offering a thoughtful comment about how life shifts when you've seen the top and the bottom. But Kimmel didn't stop. Next came a montage segment pre-recorded and unexpected, featuring a string of Brad's old interviews cut together in a way that seemed mocking. Clips of youthful arrogance, awkward pauses, and even a soundbite from a painful moment in his divorce were layered with clownish music and exaggerated voiceovers. The audience laughed, but uneasily. Brad's expression shifted, and for a long moment he just sat there, silent, letting the moment linger. "Funny," he finally said, voice steady but clipped. "But I wasn't told this was part of the segment." Kimmel grinned, trying to ease the moment with another joke. "Come on, Brad, you're too handsome to be mad." That's when the shift happened. Brad's demeanor cooled further, and he leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, looking Kimmel dead in the eyes. "You invited me here to talk about a film that means something. You're using my past like it's a punchline." Kimmel laughed nervously, but Brad didn't blink. "I've made mistakes. Everyone in this room has. But I don't come here to be made a character in your comedy reel." The crowd murmured, uncertain whether to laugh or wait. Then Brad stood, slowly, calmly. "This isn't conversation. This is theater. I'm not interested," he removed. His mic nodded once to the stunned audience. Without raising his voice or slamming a chair, he simply walked off the stage. No explosion, no profanity, just absolute, stinging silence. Asterisk, the aftershock of Brad Pitt's quiet but powerful walk-off began instantly. Inside the studio, producers scrambled, cutting to commercial, while Kimmel stared blankly at the nowing tea chair. "Well, that went well," he joked to nervous laughter. But it was already too late. By the time the show returned from break, social media had erupted into chaos. Clips of the awkward moment had already hit Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, spliced, slowed down, looped, analyzed. Fans and critics alike were split. Some accused Brad of being humorless, too self-important, incapable of taking a joke. Others hailed him as a man setting boundaries, refusing to be humiliated for ratings. The hashtags trended. Hashtag Brad walks out. Hashtag respect Brad. Hashtag Kimmel goes too far. Within an hour, major outlets picked up the story. The New York Times published a breaking headline: "Brad Pitt exits Jimmy Kimmel after on-air tension." TMZ rolled out a string of clips, some blurry phone recordings of Brad being ushered out backstage, composed but clearly disappointed. The Guardian ran a think piece within hours, titled, "When Jokes Cross the Line, the Ethics of Public Shaming Disguised as Comedy." Meanwhile, Kimmel's team released a brief statement that night. "We love Brad and regret that the moment was misunderstood. Our intention was humor, not harm." But it didn't help. Public sentiment had already begun tilting. Fellow celebrities began chiming in. Viola Davis tweeted simply, "Artists deserve dignity, period." Leonardo DiCaprio, rarely one to comment publicly, posted an image of him and Brad from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, with the caption, "Real ones know." Meanwhile, comedians rushed to Kimmel's defense, warning that the industry was becoming too sensitive. But their voices were drowned out by a rising tide of supporters who viewed Brad's exit as a form of quiet rebellion, one man's refusal to be reduced to a meme. By morning, the story had saturated every outlet. Morning shows led with it. YouTubers dissected it. Even Saturday Night Live rewrote their cold open to include a parody, something that sparked even more backlash. Brad, for his part, stayed silent. No tweets, no interviews, nothing. That silence made it all the more impactful, because it wasn't just a moment, it was a message. Asterisk. As the days passed, the narrative deepened and matured. What had started as a single tense exchange became the catalyst for a much larger conversation about celebrity, vulnerability, and the commodification of human experience. The entertainment world split into camps, those who viewed late-night shows as harmless fun, and those who argued they had become thinly veiled platforms for mockery disguised as engagement. More than once, the footage of Brad's walkout was replayed during serious discussions on cable news, where anchors asked pointedly, "Have we gone too far?" Panelists debated the ethical lines of satire, especially when it came to guests who had long histories of personal growth, addiction, recovery, and family struggles. It wasn't just about Brad anymore. It was about how stories are told and who gets to shape them. Meanwhile, Clint Eastwood, still fresh from his own clash with Kimmel months earlier, released a short comment to Variety. "I guess Jimmy's having a streak." It went viral. Brad's past interviews were suddenly being viewed in a new light. Clips where he spoke candidly about pain, mistakes, and growth gained new meaning. People started connecting the dots. They began to see not just an actor, but a man who had carried a quiet burden in public for years and had finally decided he wasn't going to smile through another disrespectful moment. Studios began to rethink talk show promotional runs. 1. Insider told Deadline, "This changes how we prepare talent. There's a new tension, now everyone's worried about who's next." Kimmel's show, though still strong in ratings, saw a subtle change. Interviews became gentler. Producers started running questions by publicists more often. Brad's walkout had shaken the format itself. As for Brad, when he finally did resurface, it was on a deeply personal podcast, no cameras, just conversation. He didn't name Jimmy. He didn't rant. But he said one line that would echo for weeks. "You spend decades rebuilding yourself. You get tired of people trying to undo it with a joke." That sentence was clipped and shared more than the incident itself. It was real. It was clear. It was Brad Pitt, finally done pretending to laugh along. Asterisk, months after the walkout, the moment had become legend. Not because it was loud, but because it was so defiantly quiet. The silence that Brad left on Jimmy Kimmel's stage continued to speak volumes across Hollywood and beyond. Artists, creators, and public figures began referencing it in interviews. It became shorthand for something bigger. The Pitt line, they called it the invisible boundary, where performance ends and self-respect begins. Talk shows adjusted. Sketch writers hesitated before including personal trauma and punchlines. Some began to wonder whether this was the moment late-night comedy began to evolve, or perhaps decline. Meanwhile, Brad's film soared to award season. Buzz. Critics called it his best performance in years. But beyond the screen, his off-camera moment had become just as important. At press events, interviewers treated him with newfound reverence. At one roundtable, a journalist nervously asked how he felt about the incident. Brad smiled, eyes calm, and said, "Sometimes you have to leave the room to be heard." That line became a movement. T-shirts, posters, even university lectures. In film ethics and media studies began using the event as a case study. Kimmel addressed it only once more, several months later, in a rare, serious monologue. "We try to make people laugh. We don't always get it right. I got it wrong with Brad. I hope he knows that." The audience gave polite applause, but the cultural moment had already passed. The world had chosen its memory, the image of Brad Pitt, quietly removing his microphone, standing up without anger or insult, and leaving a space that had ceased to honor his presence. It was, in its own way, an act of grace. It didn't end his career, it elevated it. It didn't shame him, it solidified him. And in that simple decision, Brad Pitt reminded everyone watching that dignity isn't dramatic, it's quiet, firm, and absolute. You don't always have to fight. Sometimes all you have to do is stand, walk, and never look back. And in doing so, you leave behind not just a message, but a moment that becomes history. Asterisk.